Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here once again from different locations at Lambeau Field. And Wes, the Packers 2023 minicamp has concluded. The offseason program for 2023 is also done. As you and I are recording this episode, the players are out at a paintball activity, firing away and having some fun. I wanted to get your thoughts, though, as far as wrapping up this offseason program. This entire 2023 season is going to be all about the transition to Jordan Love. So I will just throw it out there to you as an open-ended question. What were your impressions of Jordan Love based on what we got to see in this offseason work?
Good work, strong work. And I felt like, one of the things he touched on when he had his last media availability with us was two biggest points of emphasis. The first one on the field was the throwing on the run. That was something that him and Tom Clements, Connor Lewis, that entire room talked about going into this offseason program. They wanted to be able to test him a little bit more there. They did a ton of drills in that area of the field early in the camp. And then obviously that kind of naturally translates to the team period and 7-on-7 as well. That was one area of Jordan Love's game he felt like he really needed to grow in this offseason. They put the work into it. The other one is more mental. It's more from a leadership perspective, and that is the responsibility that comes with being QB1. And Jordan Love now is officially the face of the franchise. It goes hand in hand. And I thought he hit that out of the park this offseason. I mean, since the beginning of the offseason program, Mike, how many times, since the time that trade happened with Aaron Rodgers, how many times did Jordan Love speak? 3-4 times?
Yeah.
He is a guy that has that, he's quieter, but it's a quiet confidence about him. And I feel like that's really going to translate and kind of hit down to all those different levels of the offense and the entire locker room. There are going to be, good days and bad days. There were a few more interceptions, I think, this offseason program than maybe we'd seen during the Aaron Rodgers era. But I think it's also understanding, getting those reps in and trying to learn from them. And that's going to be the biggest key for Jordan Love in 2023 is what he learns from his first year as a starting quarterback in the National Football League.
Yeah, and what stood out to me the most this spring, in addition to what you just mentioned, and is actually something that you also wrote about in the Insider Inbox column, I saw a young quarterback who was willing to cut it loose.
Yeah,
it didn't feel to me, watching the practices we got to watch when the offense was in 11-on-11, when they were doing 7-on-7, the truly competitive stuff, even though it was without any pads on. He wasn't holding back. This wasn't Jordan Love, now that it's his offense to run and he's QB1, that he's suddenly just going to become check down Charlie and be hesitant to take his shots down the field to let it rip. Now we'll see what happens in training camp when it's 11-on-11, when all the guys are there, when the pads go on and the competitiveness of practice, kind of cranks up and gets to another notch. But I thought that's what exactly he did, exactly what he had to do this spring in terms of not be afraid of anything, take some chances and challenge himself as well as challenge the defense down the field. I mean, yeah, there were some interceptions, some things didn't go that well. That's what you look at on the film. That's how you learn. That's how you grow as a quarterback. And I thought the way he approached it, not saying with a careless attitude, but not being too careful and just playing the game in an aggressive manner. I liked what I saw on the field in the spring.
Yeah, I said it from the beginning, Mike. I feel like there's more of a gunslinger element to how he plays the game of football.
Absolutely.
And I think you're going to see that a little bit more probably with Love than you did with Rodgers. You have to curtail that.
Mm-hmm.
But of all the criticisms, because the original reason it came up in inbox is people saying, well, he's not one to throw downfield. Well, one, you don't know that. You've seen him. You've barely seen him play quarterback. I know that for a fact. But two, he is more than willing to put the ball downfield. That is not a trepidation whatsoever. That play he had, Mike, in Tuesday's practice, where it's a 7-on-7 drill, They're inside the Don Hutson Center, so they're being careful. Nobody was wanting to get hurt here 39 days away from the start of training camp. But that throw he had to Christian Watson, his arm strength, the trajectory of the ball, Christian Watson's speed, and his ability to catch it in stride and go downfield, that was one of the best pass and catches I've seen in my time covering the Green Bay Packers in an off-season practice period.
Yeah.
Regardless of who the quarterback is, the kid has all the intangibles of a first-round pick. It's going to be understanding the rigors and the day-to-day and everything that's involved with it, because this isn't a boxing fight. It isn't going to be one of these things where you got to go play once and then, okay, see you again in 3 months.
Yeah.
It's going to have to do it every single week, starting in July. So hopefully he gets a chance to reset here these next 5-6 weeks, come back fresh for training camp, because Mike, when they report back and the calendar starts to count down to that first preseason game, that's when things really get real.
Yeah, I mean, Matt LaFleur even said it in his final address to the media before that second minicamp practice that when training camp rolls around, it's go time. There's no holding back. I mean, and that's one of the things it's a big transition for the rookies, where OTAs is kind of learning, and it's like, okay, you make a mistake, we'll talk about it. Let's work our way through it. In training camp, when they're 11 on 11, they're running play after play after play. It's a fast-paced, competitive, get ready for the season, type of environment. And, Jordan Love has obviously been through that before, not as QB1. And he did it, at least in this mini camp setting, we did see, as we had talked about on our previous show, Jaire Alexander, Rasul Douglas, who had not been, participating in the voluntary OTAs. They were here as the starting cornerbacks in minicamp. It made for some, I guess you'd say anytime Jaire Alexander and Rasul Douglas are both on the field, there's going to be energy and spirit to a practice. You're going to hear a lot of barking and chirping, and that's just the way they go about it. And so it was, you could definitely feel their presence was back on the field. But that was also important stuff, particularly in the 7-on-7s for Jordan Love to challenge himself, to challenge the defense, to challenge his receivers to go make some plays against those guys before training camp gets here, and it gets a lot more serious in terms of preparing for the season.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was one of those sort of litmus tests, those barometers for where a young quarterback needs to be. And I thought, there was going to be some battles there. I thought you saw, Jaire Alexander, as Love talked about, he kind of baited him into one in the 2-minute drill, being able to get that pick off of him. But that big pass to Christian Watson, that was over Alexander as well.
Who says zone defense never works, right?
Yeah.
That was a zone call, and Job baited him into the kind of that honey hole throw down the sideline, and then boom, interception, and that ends the 2-minute drill. And that's those are the kind of plays that guys like number 23 can make.
Yeah, no doubt. And I also like that going back to Tuesday's practice inside the Don Hutson Center, that red zone period where the defense is winning that drill one after another, right? They're within the first, 10, 15 yards of the end zone. But then Love just throws an absolute dime on kind of a corner fade to Romeo Doubs. Doubs makes a phenomenal catch on the play. Yeah. That was over Jaire Alexander's coverage too. So
dragged his feet, kept his feet in bounds on that one too, right in the corner.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, in that kind of look, Mike, I mean, credit to Corey Ballantine and Shamar John Charles and all these young corners that have been in here. Keyshawn Nixon was here for a lot of these practices too, but the game's different when it's a 2-time All-Pro out there. And I feel like that's really strong work for Love to get now as he prepares to see that type of look every single day of August.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, a couple other topics I want to get to here, but first, a little bit of sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7. 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right. Well, one item that we had talked about on our last show in terms of previewing minicamp actually did come to fruition, in that we got to see rookie 6th-round draft pick and kicker Anders Carlson in a couple of field goal periods here during minicamp. One was inside the Hudson Center on Tuesday with all the rain outside. Another was on Wednesday when the players were back out on Nitschke Field. And the first thing I'll say about Anders Carlson is leg strength is not a problem, and exactly why he's a kicker who was drafted, not one who ended up going the undrafted route. The young man has a big leg.
You know, it was funny, Mike, because we talked all offseason program about when are we going to see Anders Carlson? When are we going to see Anders Carlson kick? Because they've just been something. It's one thing I like actually that Bisaccia does is it's very procedural, right? I've seen them take more reps at field goal kicks without actually kicking the ball than any other time in my 10 years covering this team. I mean, he does it religiously, making sure guys know their blocking assignment, making sure you see what the snap looks like, the hold looks like, that everything else is there other than the kick, because ultimately you do want to keep these guys healthy and you want to keep the, kicking and punting legs strong. That being said, we got to see Anders Carlson kick a lot of field goals on Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, he's booming these things, but they're inside the Don Hudson Center. So you're kind of like, okay, what is it? This is perfect conditions, no issues. Well, then he goes out to the practice field on Wednesday. And Mike, there was one period where they're doing some 7-on-7 work, but Carlson is practicing the operation right in front of us, and he is kicking probably 7-8 feet in front of us. And I use this as my insider inbox headline. I mean, the ball just torpedoes off his foot.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to put this guy in the Packers Hall of Fame. We got a long way to go. We got to see what the field goal accuracy looks like. But from a pure fundamental standpoint, after hearing Rich Bisaccia and Brian Gutekunst and all these guys talk about this young man's leg strength, holy moly, Anders Carlson has a foot on him. And lastly, I'll just quickly say, I was talking to Colby Wooden, his teammate at Auburn, who, by the way, I didn't know this until he mentioned it. They also were locker mates within one of each other at Auburn too. So very familiar feeling for both of those guys being next to each other in Green Bay. But he said, yeah, I mean, the thing you got to understand about Durs, he kept calling him Durs, is that, the amount of athletic ability that this young man has mixed with his work ethic and how much him and his brother really live, breathe, and eat kicking, it gives him a really solid chance now to be able to follow in Daniel's footsteps in the NFL and be, I think, the type of, kicking prodigy that a lot of people predicted him to be when he succeeded him at Auburn.
Yeah, and what really caught my eye in watching him with the field goals, and we saw him, I believe, in the 2 practices in terms of charting it, he made 11 out of 12 from several distances, from extra point distance all the way to 50 plus on a couple of those kicks. What really caught my eye was particularly on the long distance kicks, that it looks pretty effortless with him. It's not like you're seeing this this big wind up and like maximum effort and a grunt when he kicks the ball or anything like that. I mean, it's whether he's kicking a 33-yard extra point or a 53-yard field goal, it looks pretty easy in that leg doesn't look like there's a whole lot of effort going into it. And just from the appearances, it was impressive to watch. As you said, everything with regard to accuracy and kicking in Lambeau Field when the winds start to swirl in November and December and all that, he's going to have a lot of stuff to work through, just like any young player making that transition. But boy, you can certainly see why the Packers were high on him as a prospect, despite looking strictly statistically at some of his numbers from Auburn, that the percentages and whatnot didn't necessarily jump off the page, and there was some injury history there. This was a prospect that the Packers really, really like, and we got to see why they like it. That
was one thing I talked with Wooden about too. It would be more of a concern, I think, if it was okay structurally. This kid's, he's kicking his back out, he's kicking his leg out. It's the freak injuries that happen there. I mean, trying to recover an onside kick, tearing your ACL, that's just bad luck, right? Yeah. And then spending your senior year trying to kick while having a knee brace on your plant leg. I mean, just things that kickers are not necessarily used to or really natural to them. But as you said, Mike, and it bears repeating, the fact that he does it so effortlessly, what does that matter? Why is that such a big deal? Because the more you got to strain to kick that ball, the more likely it is you're going to mishit it. You're going to lose that accuracy piece. When you are able to be free flowing and natural with your kicking motion, that's how you get it right down the pipe. That's one thing I learned from Mason Crosby. When everything else lines up, the distance and power takes care of itself. I mean, obviously there's the Justin Tuckers of the world. I'm sure can probably just kick it from anywhere on the field and make it.
Well, you see guys like Justin Tucker, they make that extra effort when he's trying a 66 yarder or whatever. But when it's, 55 or 58 yards and in anywhere in there, Justin Tucker doesn't look like he's trying all that hard either.
Yeah. And that's where this all comes together. And we'll have to see how this thing looks in training camp, but I think it's really interesting that the rookies, that the Packers drafted there, how funny is it that here we are going into training camp now, and that's the only that's the only specialist position where the Packers don't have multiple guys at. It's Anders Carlson, and the Packers are going to be looking for him to win that job this summer.
Yeah. Well, one last topic before we sign off for the offseason. We did get to hear after Wednesday's practice from Rashan Gary, the fifth-year outside linebacker. First comments to the media since injuring his knee, the torn ACL at Detroit last November. And story on the website, I wrote a quick story after the interview on Wednesday after the practice. He's not making any promises in terms of a timeline. He was asked, hey, can you be back for week 1? How about training camp? Where are things at? And he just said multiple times, I'll be ready when I'll be ready. But what I took from that, it was more of how he said it and the attitude that he was carrying in answering those questions. He sounded very upbeat and positive. He likes the track that he is on. And if there's one thing we know about Rashan Gary, it's that if there is anything he can do in terms of his rehab, if there's anything the medical staff is going to let him do to try to work his way back any faster, he is going to do it, because he's an absolutely relentless worker. And it sounds like, things are pointing in a positive direction in terms of his return at some point, hopefully early in the 2023 season.
I don't know, Mike, if I've ever seen someone who seems to enjoy the grind more than Rashan Gary. Now, I'm sure he doesn't want to be having to go through a rehab right now, but when you talk about workouts, when you talk about going the extra mile, when you talk about practice, this young man gives it his all, Mike. And I have been, there was a moment after he got done with his presser, his scrum was on one side. I was over at Jordan Love on the other. And I'm looking at him as he's walking back, getting all of his other things together. And I'm like, dude, if I didn't know any better, I would think that Rashan Gary is perfectly fine and in the best shape of his life. I mean, that's how he looks right now. He doesn't look like a guy that's rehabbing an ACL. He looks like a guy that's ready for week 1. Don't go running away with that. It's still going to take time. You need to make sure that the ACL is strong and everything. But the guy's just, you can tell, Mike, he has not taken a day off. If there's something that he's allowed to do, something that he's cleared and greenlit to do, he is going to do those activities. Oh, and then by the way, spent a lot of time here this offseason, was around all these young guys. Kingsley Enagbari is learning from that. Lucas Van Ness is learning from that. Every single young guy in there, Mike, much like with Preston Smith, Rashan Gary has been that guiding light and that force. And if you have a teammate, a star, a leader like him that is putting in all that effort, and we don't know when he's going to be back to the field, well, how much does that motivate you when you're the one they're going to be counting on until Rashan is back, until number 52 is running through that tunnel again? I just think it raises the awareness and heightens the energy and urgency of everybody on that defensive side of the ball. Because, Mike, as we've heard all these guys talk about, Preston Smith, Jaire Alexander, Darnell Savage, Kenny Clark, everybody talked about how last season didn't fully meet their expectations and where they want to see this thing go now in 2023. When Gary gets back, he is going to be hellfire and brimstone trying to take down the opposing quarterback. And I think everybody else that understands, okay, this is the work that Rashan's putting in while I'm healthy and I'm ready to go, I have to make sure that I'm playing to that standard as well.
Yeah, no question about it. And also in the midst of all the rehab and everything else, he found time to finish up his classwork and get his degree from the University of Michigan. He graduated in Ann Arbor at the end of April. So congratulations to Rashan Gary on that. That was a promise he had made to his mother when he left school early, entered the NFL draft with some time in college still left to go. So congrats to him there. We've talked about it, Wes, on this show, on an annual basis. We've seen the progression from Rashan Gary, a couple of sacks as a rookie, handful of sacks his second year, approaches double digits his third year. And then he was going like gangbusters last year. He had 6 sacks in the first 8 games. And it wasn't even just the sack numbers, but just the pressures, the constant pressure on the quarterback, the impact he was having on opposing quarterbacks. I think he even had, there might have been at least one sack or something that was wiped out by a penalty, I think, early in the season last year. But he's on pace for double digits, and who knows what he would have had. But then the injury happens in game number 9, halfway through the season in Detroit, and suddenly it all comes to a screeching halt. But you just get the sense that at the end of the day, Rashan Gary is going to make this ACL injury and the whole rehab and recovery just a blip on the radar screen in terms of where his career is going. And this Packers defense, I mean, Matt LaFleur even said, I'm sort of looking out of the corner of my eye every day at what's going on with Rashan Gary's rehab when he's off to the side during practice. How's he looking? How's he doing? I mean, everybody wants to see this guy back in full force, and we'll just have to see what the timeline is. But this Packers defense, all of his teammates are going to be excited to get him back on the field at some point this coming season.
Yeah, and not that Rashan Gary needs any extra motivation, because I think the kid has that naturally ingrained in him that has already been uploaded into his memory bank. But the fact is, he is also going to, he's entering a contract year. He's playing on that 5th-year option right now. When you were talking about what might have been had he not got hurt, you don't know what extensions look like. You don't know what those guaranteed contracts look like. Whenever he is cleared, whenever he's good to go, he's playing for that next contract too. So I just think there's so many things going the right direction for him, and whatever happens, you don't have to worry about Rashan Gary. You don't have to worry about what his motivation level is going to be like, how he's going to approach things. The kid is absolutely 190% all ball. And for the Green Bay Packers, they need him back. They need that pass rush. I think if he's able to get back here at some point, I don't know when, first half of the season, whenever, you think about the possibilities with Lucas Van Ness, you think of the possibilities with all those guys. There's so many different things the Green Bay Packers can do, and it's right there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be something to watch whenever we do see Rashan Gary get back on the field. It's going to be a big story for this team and a big lift for this 2023 Packers defense whenever that does happen. So with that, we're going to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted, which also puts a wrap on the 2023 off season. We will be back at some point just prior to training camp to preview what'll be coming up when things hit full speed in training camp in late July. And hopefully, Wes, we won't be talking to each other, through a computer screen. Maybe we'll be both back in the studio, kind of with our old setup. We're crossing our fingers.
I won't be here. I'm guaranteeing you that right now. I won't be in this spot.
Crossing our fingers that will be the case. We can get back to the traditional way that we produce this show. So
the way the good Lord intended.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you next time.